Hi everyone, good morning. We are Green Eagles and today we're going to be presenting our solution, Eagle Share. We're just going to give you a quick introduction about each of us.
Hello everyone, my name is Max Hoffmeister. I'm a sophomore at CSOM and I'm studying finance and history.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle. I'm a sophomore in MCAS. I'm studying economics, environmental studies, and finance, and I'm from Belcom.
Hi everyone, I'm Ethan. I'm a sophomore in MCAS as well, studying environmental studies and finance, and I'm from Los Altos, California. So to give you a quick lay of the land, we're going to begin with our executive summary, then identify the problem, go through our two-pronged solution of the physical and digital infrastructure necessary, give you an overview of the club impact, the financial impact, and then end it with stakeholder analysis and implementation and timelines. So here's a quick linked appendix for future reference. And so the objective at a high level is to strengthen OSI sustainability efforts by embedding environmentally sustainable practices across student organizations and operations.
All right, so this is where inspiration for our solution came from. As you can see, the Carney lockers are a total mess. The pictures don't do them justice. If you walk in there, you have no clue what's going on. There's club items all over the floor, all over the walls, everywhere. It's not organized. And frankly, no clubs know exactly what's in their own lockers. Supplies go to waste, items overflow each semester and get thrown out or don't ever get reused for years. And so because of this, clubs end up repurchasing identical materials that either they own or other clubs could own but have no idea that's in their own locker. And because of this, the Student Organization Funding Committee, which I'm a chair of, reimburses duplicate purchases every single cycle. The supplies are bought, forgotten, and then bought again. And there's a lot of money and supplies being wasted as a result of this.
So analyzing this issue a little bit further, we surveyed a lot of our classmates and personal friends that are club leaders of clubs that OSI funds, and 69% of the club leaders that we surveyed said that they didn't even know what was in their own locker, and then 71% of these leaders do not check their inventory before submitting their budgets for the upcoming semester. And we talked with a few people who are actually involved in this challenge, and one of them being Andrew Belchner. He is Assistant Director of Student Organizations, and he mentioned that he supervises it with their office administration. There is no system currently, and we only track who's in each locker. And then we talked with Hi'ile Long, who's the chapter director of one of the clubs I'm part of, Girls Inc., and the secretary of Hawaii Club. She says it is messy because no one is being held accountable. I don't even know whose lockers are whose, and the lockers don't lock. And then we talked to Kaya Park, who is on the executive board of Asian Caucus, which is the umbrella club of a lot of individual Asian clubs here at BC. She said no one is directly responsible for the AC locker. She texted their e-board group chat and no one knows or keeps track of what is inside. And so in researching this issue and also diving deeper, speaking with people, we proposed a hybrid system, Eagle Share, that combines a centralized physical storage system with a digital inventory tracking model.
Yeah, so getting into the execution of physical infrastructure, I divided that into three main parts. So the first bucket would be storage restructuring. That would include new lockers and shelving within the Carney storage unit. And this Carney storage unit would only be able to be accessed by the OSI and the student employees. This wouldn't allow students to come in, check out items as they please, which would allow for better organization and accountability across BC and student organizations. We designated 2 pickup hours a week, Monday and Thursday from 12 to 5 p.m. And I think this would give ample time for students to be able to come in and check out their goods as they need. The second bucket would be retrofitting to a QR system. We already have a lot of reusable inventory that we're not using effectively, but in the gaps that we need to fill, we want to invest into more reusable inventory. An example of that could be using a whiteboard instead of a poster board, things like that. And then we want to attach QR codes to all that inventory for the tracking system, which Max is going to cover in the digital infrastructure a little later. And the final bucket would be physical compatibility. So at the front desk, we want to have an iPad where we could check in, check out items through scanning those QR codes we attach to the inventory. And then we want to utilize that student familiarity around scanning QR codes that exist with the green to-go containers in the dining hall. Same thing for laundry. You scan a QR code through an app and you can get the machine to work. So we want to use that existing channel and familiarity to our advantage.
Right, so when coming up for inspiration for our digital infrastructure, we looked first at the library system as I spoke with Doug as well as Paul Britton, who run that system, and he suggested that we use a software called Sortly. And so our approach would be a third-party inventory management software, and the benefits of this is that it would require minimal setup. The so the inventory software is pre-made, and so it can be maintained and updated consistently with a lot less work on our end. And in terms of functionality, this site would track inventory through a website as well as an app, and this would display and organize the available items for each club. And this is very important because funding week happens over break while students are all home, and so students would not be able to access their inventories or their lockers in person, and so clubs would have no idea what they need or what they can access or what they can share from the inventories, and so that makes the system a lot more useful. As well as OSI compatibility, this will be integrated into the SOFC funding system because this would allow the SOFC to use negative reinforcement, for example, lowering food caps for non-cultural food in order to force clubs to be more readily compliable to this system.
So diving deeper into what Sortly looks like and the platform. So over here we have the account, and so OSI would create an account where they spearhead and manage everything, and over on the left there are lots of folders and then subfolders within subfolders, and so we would have the available inventory, and then we break it down into categories, so reusable items, hardware, decorations, etc., etc. And a great feature of Sortly is that each club can get their own private folder that no other clubs can access. And so within that folder, we'd be able to have what items that they had checked out previously and private items that other clubs can use as well. And going into an example of a club, the Chinese Student Association of Boston College, they have primary events throughout the year that repeat and where they would need materials for each of these events. So one being the culture show, the next being a Lunar New Year celebration, and then their retreat at the beginning of the year for their members. And their needs for storage are primary 3 categories: costumes, materials for event decoration, and stationery. And annually they spend around $430 within these 3 categories. And so an example of how we would use our proposed system is Lunar New Year celebration coming up. Step 1, I as a student of CSA would log on to EagleShare through Sortly, and I would identify the items needed. Say I need 3 tables, speakers, a microphone, and a tent. And I would pre-order these items at least a week in advance on the software, and I'd receive a confirmation email from Sortly. And then I would go and retrieve the items from storage, and like Ethan mentioned, during the pickup hours. And a student worker would scan the QR code on each of these items. And to be held accountable, the student that picks up these items will then receive an email with a deadline to remind them, like the library does for their charger check-in, check-out system. And this would be important to remind them to avoid a red flag on future funding that could occur. Future funding losses, sorry. And then step 4 would be returning the items back, and they'd bring them back. The student worker would check for damage, scan them back into the system, and then another club would be able to use them. And so breaking down the types of items in the inventory into 3 different categories. First, we have reusable items. So that would be hardware, things for decoration like tablecloths, stationery, entertainment. I personally think spike ball would be great as an avid player myself. And then one-time use items. So obviously, we want to push clubs towards the more sustainable route into using reusable items, but that is not 100% feasible. We know that, some events they would need compostable utensils and napkins, some plates. We wouldn't want to reuse that throughout all the clubs. But say a club checks out a pack of 50 reusable plates, they use maybe 30 of them, they can check back in the other 20 instead of the leftover being tossed in the trash and never to be used again. And some special cases would be, so for example, CSA, during the culture show, they use a dragon head for the lion dance, and so other clubs wouldn't really use this item, so it would be stored in their private folder in Sortly. And high value tech, things like cameras or iPads wouldn't really be given away like disposable forks would be. So maybe things like a waiter or a deposit would be needed for these higher valuation items. And then lastly would be miscellaneous like apparel and custom clothing that clubs have made and want to reuse every year.
All right, so now to dive into the financials. First, we wanted to look at the positive impact that EagleShare would have on campus. So we looked at official SOC funding tracker for this last semester and looked at 4 different categories: costumes, equipment, decoration, and event supplies, all of which are categories of items which we think are generally very reusable. And they total to about $75,000 spent on those 4 categories alone this semester. And so if we assume that we would reuse about 1/4 of these items being requested, that's about $15,000 saved per semester, $30,000 saved per year. And so now to look into the costs. For our setup costs, we are looking at about just under $21,000 worth of setup. And for our current staffing model, we're looking at about $6,000 a year on wages paid to these students. And when we add those together with the subscription of the Sortly software, we look at $8,600 a year. And another important note is the surge staffing, which would be very important because for the first 2 weeks of each semester, we know that there'd be a high volume of students going to and from these storage lockers just after funding week. And so we would need more people on the job to help smooth out that process. So when we put this all together, we're looking at a total net annual benefit of $21,000 per year. And given our initial setup cost of just under $21,000, we're looking at a break-even point of just under 1 year.
So looking into diving deeper on who's involved in this solution, EagleShare would have four main stakeholders. The first being obviously the different student organizations. You know, we're all part of clubs here at BC ourselves, and we care about resource accessibility and the ease of convenience for us, but we're trying to push sustainability to the forefront of a lot of these clubs' minds. So EagleShare would be a great way to do that. And next, looking into OSI and SOFC, they drive and spearhead this whole storage process, and they also are allocated to the funding side, and so they would also care about EagleShare. And looking at BC as an institution, we want to advance their sustainability goals, and so this would be a great way of doing so. And finally, extending it to the larger Boston community, we want to foster a better relationship with Newton and greater Boston, and so this would foster community-wide sustainability behavior.
All right, so for the implementation and scalability, I divided it into pre-launch, launch, and pilot year, and post-launch phases, so those three make up the bulk. The pre-launch would take place effectively after our presentation and go to summer 26. So that would be the digital and physical infrastructure developments. And one thing I want to point out there is we'd like to create an onboarding orientation and assessment for BC clubs. So to participate and be a BC club, you have to take this assessment, and I think that will smooth out the transition to a new system better. Within the launch and pilot year, that would begin fall 2026 to spring 2027. And a key point there is the grace period that we're going to have for the first year of this program. So what that grace period is that there's going to be a 3-strike system for clubs. So this would grant 3 free passes for clubs to return items a little bit late, and hopefully they don't get past that 3 systems, but once they do, then they will incur the penalty. But for that first year, we really want to focus on making it a smooth transition and creating a good reputation around our new inventory tracking system. So that's why we have that grace period in place. Spring 2027, we want to track the cost savings and sustainability impacts to see if they're lining up with the estimates that we already had, and make adjustments during that period. And then finally, within that post-launch phase, we want to explore other ways we can expand our system. So a potential way could be that onboarding system would be on campus, similar to the Office of Global Education and the Study Abroad modules, and then explore adding the link to EagleShare within MyBC or Agora portal. And we also want to potentially look at graduate student organizations to involve them within the sustainability movement as well. And then so we understand that a lot of plans can have many complications that could cause these proposals to fizzle out over time. So we wanted to identify a couple major risks and what we can do to mitigate them. So the first one would be student reluctance to use EagleShare. And our answer to that is, unfortunately, they don't have a choice. We're going to centralize it under the OSI and SOFC, and they'll be working together, and student organizations will have to listen to this. And then the second risk, reuse fraction uncertainty. So that would include that it might not be a 1/5 reusable for inventory, and it could be 1/10, a 10% reusability. But however, even with that 10%, we still see that we save around $15,000 annually, which adds up over a year, over a long period of time, and keeps the break even at just over a year. And then finally, third-party issues, potential issues with third-party company itself. What happens if Sortly goes out of business? What happens if their software has errors or bugs? We identified on the market that there are many alternative solutions to Sortly, but Sortly is our current pick that matches what we want right now, but there are many solutions out there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question about Sortly itself. So it seems like you had a chance to, maybe through a trial or something, get some exposure to it, experience it. What's your experience of using Sortly? Was it friendly, easy? Would you like to use it as club members? And what's it like?
Yeah, we did a short demo with Sortly, and we found that out of all the options out there, it's one of the easiest to use, and we think that's important for club leaders, is because a lot of treasurers are a lot more hands-off and don't like to put as much effort in, and so having a very simple system like Sortly is very visual, it's very organized, it's not very technical for a very experienced person, so we think that's more beneficial for the kind of audience we're looking at, which is student club leaders.
And I also want to add on to that, the folder system that Sortly has, it really mimics the folder system of MacBooks or Windows for the Windows users out there. And it's like there's a folder and then there's subfolders in there and they're organized within that sidebar. So it's something that club users don't have to spend too much time trying to learn and understand. It's very easily accessible to previous knowledge.
Yeah, I also wanted to highlight that when going through Sortly, you can go into each individual item, kind of tag them, have different notes for them. You have the QR codes right here. Like, it gives very detailed and enough space to be ordered to write enough information about the different items that we'll have in the categories. And we also went through the different features. There are a lot in the premium, so we didn't include them all, but they're in our appendix. So there's, lots of features for Sortly we went through, and we found that it would be very convenient for VC students to access this, whether they'll link through MyVC or through Agora.
I have a logistics question for y'all, going off your CSA example. So you all mentioned the kind of limiting of the open access of those storage spaces, the 2 time we kind of pick up thing. So for CSA's Lunar New Year, they do have that giant dragon head that y'all mentioned. Do you think that you'll run into issues in terms of like buy-in, in terms of like actually want to pick it up, where it's more of a labor intensive on the OSI staff or the student organizations themselves to say, all right, I have to go in on Wednesday, grab this giant lion head for our Saturday event and kind of run around campus and move around versus just having that open access to go grab those large items when needed.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally see like the point that you're going around campus with that big head, but I think like the main benefit of that is like we have that storage space for that dragon head, and given that we have the 2 times, like it's a total of 10 hours that students can come in, I think we strategically plan those days. So Friday, like any events on the weekend, Friday would be that pickup time, so you could get in there after class. I know a lot of students don't like to have classes on Fridays, so that would be a good time. And then when that doesn't work, we do have that Monday pickup time, and I think I mentioned Friday, and not Thursday. Yeah. But yeah, I think that 2 times a week really gives the flexibility for students to come in. And as for the log, it'll be a little bit of a hike.
I also think one important thing too is that with 23,000 in benefit every year, there is a little bit of room in order, if we need it, and if it didn't work out, to only have it open twice a week, have it open more days, and maybe shorter shifts, and maybe have it open two hours a day for 2 extra days a week, so maybe it could be open 4 days. But I think that something like that is very easily changed depending on how the program goes down the line.
I was going to add, that's why we have the grace period to like fix any minor bugs or logistical issues to further implement when we actually implement.
So I have one last question. Max, I'm going to point to you for the SOC perspective here. As you know, like we're seeing like $500,000 in unapproved funding. Do you think that would have any impact on your cost analysis overall? Because what I'm imagining is whatever that unused funding you guys mentioned in your analysis would be pulled out of the SOFC student org budget, which would obviously, with such a high demand, would be repurposed in that way.
Yeah, well, I also think that in order giving clubs more money that they normally would not get money still adds value to the campus, and so I think that the money going straight to whoever's funding the inventories is not really like the direct comparison. It's more about the value we're creating. We're creating $21,000 more worth of money we can give to other clubs to host more events. So it's less about a direct money's going here and getting taken from here, but more we're adding more value to campus than we're taking away.
And I'd like to add on to that a lot of the items in storage right now, people don't know that it's there. And so it's kind of wasting those items. They're like rotting away and left to collect dust, and they're buying new ones every single semester. And so I think that costs aside, the environmental impact of that is very wasteful, and I think that obviously cost is a benefit, reallocating the extra costs, but also we're not wasting storage that we already have.